Hi guys, my name is Peter Freshy and I'm going to be doing a beginner's D3.js tutorial. So first off, I'm going to start by talking about what D3.js actually is. So D3.js stands for Data-Driven Documents, and it's essentially a JavaScript library for manipulating documents based on data. And it kind of helps you create very effective and modern visualizations using HTML, SVG, and CSS. So now I'd like to travel to the D3.js website and look at their introduction. So as I said before, they allow you to bind arbitrary data to the DOM and then apply data-driven transformations to the document. So for example, you can use D3 to generate an HTML table from an array of numbers, or you can use the same data to create an interactive SVG bar chart with smooth transitions and interaction. D3 also has a lot of really powerful tools for creating animations and transitions. D3 is extremely fast, it supports huge data sets and has a lot of options for dynamic behaviors, for user interaction. It's all written in JavaScript, so if you've done JavaScript before, it's not going to be very far off than what you're used to. I'd like to talk a little bit about the D3 selections, which is what D3 is kind of founded on. So as you can see here, it gives this example using JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, which is very tedious. You have to do .get elements by tag name, etc., loop through the paragraph, and it's a huge hassle. D3 uses selectors almost like jQuery, if you're familiar with that, to make styling changes and really simplify loops overall. So for example, this whole loop here can be simplified into just selecting all paragraph elements in the HTML and styling it with the color white. I'd also like to check out the Wikipedia page for D3.js here. So here, as you can see, it was developed by Mike Bostock and Jeffrey here, and it's written in JavaScript. You can read more about it by going to the Wikipedia page. So because D3.js is written in JavaScript and uses a functional style, that means you can kind of reuse code and add specific functions to achieve what you'd like. So that means that if someone before has done a bar chart then for a different set of data, then you can often, if you're building a website and you want to put in a bar chart using D3.js, you can use some of their code and essentially change it to fit your data, which makes really reusable templates and reusable data, which makes it a lot easier for developers. I'll talk briefly about the predecessor to D3.js, which is called Protovis. This was another graphical approach to visualization. It's no longer under active development, but the same team is now developing D3.js. If you want to look at all the functionality of D3.js, you can go to the D3.js website and you can click on the API documentation and figure out every single feature that it offers. It's a little bit complicated to read, and so that's why I think it's more practical to use examples to learn how to use D3.js. So now I'm going to take a look at some of the examples of D3.js and see what you can use it for. So if I go to the D3.js website, I arrive at this cool display here, and it shows me kind of a lot of the different things that you can do with D3.js. These really range in complexity. So some might start out with just like a simple pie chart or a bar chart, and then some you get really complicated, or very cool visualizations. I'll show you a couple of these. So I think the main idea behind D3.js is to be able to present to the user data, but in a better way. So sometimes data is often hard to interpret, and D3.js gives developers more tools to represent data. Briefly, I'll talk about the limitations of D3.js. So D3 doesn't always try to support older browsers. There's sometimes, if you're on an older browser, you're going to just have to see a static placeholder and it won't load. There's also some data source limitations. It's really hard to conceal the original data for developers. So if you're using data that's sensitive or private and you don't want it to be shared, it can be kind of challenging to use D3. So there are some alternatives like Tableau and Matplotlib and even Excel and Plotly, which are kind of other approaches to visualizations, and you can check those out. So now we're going to dive into two different simple examples. The starter code is located in the starter code folder in the Intro to D3 repository at this website here. I've posted a link to this in the description, and you can also check it out here. So I'm going to be working in starter code, and then you can also check out the full code once you've completed the examples right here. All right, so I'm going to be in here. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the starter code here. I have Sublime Text open. That's my favorite text editor. And I have the starter code here, and I'm going to be working with, so I have example 1 and example 2, and they're blank right now, and you can see they're based off these two websites here. So this is what it's going to look like when we're done. Basically, the two examples are a pie chart and a line graph. So we have, in this first example here, we have a pie chart and we have some data. If you look in the JS folder in the app.js file, so right here you can see I have an object called sales, and I have various products and different counts inside. So it's actually very simple to create something like this in D3.js. I'm going to walk you through how to do it. Alright, so first I'm going to just quickly show you guys the HTML. So we have index.html, and I have an example 1 here and an h2 header, and I have an SVG in here with a class of pi, and I've set the width and the height. I have imported D3, and that's done here by just looking at this script tag here, the min.js D3. And I have another script here from my own personal JS that we're going to be working with, and I have that right below. All right, so now, and then I also have the CS, and then I also have the CSS here. All right, so we're going to be in app.js, and we're going to take a look here. Okay, so what do we have to do? Okay, so first we're going to have to set up the angles of the pie using the pie layout helper. So this is something that's built into D3.js, and so we're going to say var pie equals d3.layout.py, and then we're going to return the d count. Next, we're going to have to connect our data to the slices. So we're going to say var slices is equal to pie, parenthesis, and then we're going to pass in our sales. And our sales is the data that we have up here. Next, we're going to set the size of the pie chart. So we're going to say arc, and that's going to be d3.svg.arc. And this is another built-in feature. And then we're going to say, we're going to chain on to that the inner radius is going to be 0 because we don't want a hole in the middle. And the outer radius is going to be 100. Now this is another helper that they have that's called category 10, as you can see. And what it does is especially for pie charts, that's very useful because it has 10 different colors, and it'll match the colors when you create the legend later on the right side of the screen. So it'll match these colors with the colors that are on the pie charts. It's very helpful. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to say var color equals d3.scale.category10. All right, so next I'm going to say var svg is equal to d3.select, which is the selector that I talked about earlier, svg.py, because that is the SVG here has a class of pi that I've put in the HTML. Next, I'm going to create a D3 group, which is what D3 uses to designate the different parts of a visualization. I'm going to create an attribute on that, and I'm going to say transform, and I'm going to translate it 200 x 100 y. And what this will do is it'll set the center of the pie chart to be approximately around here. Next, I'm going to select all the slices and the data that's with them. I'm going to have them enter the document, then append them to the path. I'm going to set another attribute here, and that's going to be that the class will be slice. Another attribute is going to be that the fill is going to be the function determined by passing in D. It's going to be an anonymous function, and I'm going to pass in D, and I'm going to return the color of the d.data.product. And that'll be the color that I've set up here. Now it's important to note that when I select this path.slice, this doesn't exist yet, but that's fine because I can make that selection here and then enter the data with that connected to that selector, and then I can append these things to that, whether it's there or not. The next thing that I have to do is build the legend. So I'm going to fix this to D3 instead of D4. That was an error. And I'm going to see what I have so far. So when I refresh, you can see that I have my pie chart, and it looks to be properly divided between the data that I have here. And then we're going to add the legend to make sense of the data. So to do that, we're going to access that SVG. We're going to append another group, and we're going to set another attribute, and that class is going to be legend. We're going to select all the text, pass in our slices, enter in this data, and append in the text. And this is going to be a function, D, anonymous function that returns. So I've copied in the legend code to make sure it's correct. And you can see that we'll have the text of the legend be a bullet point, and then whatever the product is, and then plus a parenthesis and the number. So here I have the d.data.count. So that's going to access the count here. And then I'm going to fill it with the color that I've determined earlier. And then when we refresh the page, we can see that it's updated here. We have our Snickers is 12, Twix is 30, Pez is 9, Nerds is 19, Rolo is 10, Altoids 5, and Not Any is 15. So we can see that that's properly been divided just by D3. And when you look at the code, it's really not that much code. And this can be reused for whatever data. You could have an external data file, you could have a much bigger data set, and you could always bring that into the pie chart, and using very similar code achieve the same goal. All right, so now